I found a couple of different passages, texts, that gave the meaning for his name. Did anyone else find the meaning for his name? No, you didn't look. His name means lovely, lovely. And it was actually a term that was used, and I forget which false god it was used in reference to frequently. His name wasn't directly connected to it, but the worshipers of this one particular false god often would use his name, because it meant lovely, in connection with their God, in their worship. I forget which one it was. Something to do with health, though. Anyway, Epaphroditus. We often talk about distance. Distance in our day and time is not as big of a deal as it was in their time. We're talking about, let's see, Philippi, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is somewhere right in here. Let me move this over a little bit. So Jerusalem is over here, Antioch right in here, and Philippi over in this area, and Rome way over here. Okay, so there's quite some distance between all of these places. Now, for us today, how much time would it take to get a message from Philippi to Rome? A split second, right? Because I can text you or I can call you. For them, this is this is quite some distance, and I didn't find any text that related exactly. I could have measured it, I guess, but it wouldn't have been exactly accurate how far it is. But you can see this is going to take some time to travel this distance to deliver. Because to deliver a message during this time, it had to be either a handwritten letter, and then you had to secure a trustworthy courier to bring that message, and then probably pay him a little extra so that he would hang around until the person you delivered the letter to was able to pen another letter and have that same courier bring the letter back to you. A lot involved in this, or you would maybe hire someone just to deliver a message, not handwritten, and you've got to trust that person to deliver the message, or maybe it's a friend you know that's already going that way. There's so much involved in getting messages delivered during this time, so it was important that you could trust the individual. Just reminds me of how much you can't trust your email or even text messages. How many of you have had to go through, at work, security training regarding your computer and your email? All right. If you have a computer or email at work and your business is of any substantial size, you've had to go through training like this because, well, people are falling for these scams every day, all day long. And some of them are very well put together, these scams. And so it's really easy to fall for these things. You can't trust any email that you get. If you get an email saying you owe money or you paid this or that, don't click a link in that email. Don't call the phone numbers in that email. Go directly to the website through your web browser and check it that way. Never click on emails, because they can make emails look exactly like the emails that you get that are legitimate. So you can't trust it. It's important that you can trust messages. It was important during this time too. They had They had people claiming to be apostles who were not apostles. They had people who were claiming to be Christ who was not the Christ. There are a lot of false teachers out in the world during this time as well. But this man, Epaphroditus, is one who would deliver this message not for Paul, well, initially not for Paul, but he would eventually. He starts out with delivering something for the church in Philippi, which makes us believe that he was from Philippi. Now, Paul, in his first missionary journey, in his first imprisonment, that would have been in Acts 28 in Rome. He describes it in Acts 28, his relationship with the Philippians. But he would write the letter to Philippi during his imprisonment in Rome. So Paul is in Rome. We showed the map. He's in Rome. He sends a letter to the church in Philippi. Now the church in Philippi is responding to him through Epaphroditus. When Paul came on his second missionary journey, that's not Michael Jordan. That's missionary journey. That's in Acts 16. He established the congregation in Philippi. Who else was in Philippi? Just think of Acts 16 and you probably put two and two together there. Lydia. Lydia was in Acts 16. She's in Philippi. She's in this church here. And so there were, so we know there's at least one person in the congregation that had wealth. She was a seller of purple. She made good money doing that. But his efforts here, Paul's efforts with this congregation, never ceased. I mean, he starts the congregation and he's constantly checking on the congregation. He has a deep connection with them. In his third journey, we find that in Acts 20. He would actually spend time in Philippi. So he's spent time with them a lot. He's built this relationship with them, and the congregation now, while Paul is in prison, wants to do what for him? They want to send money. They want to, and they would do this while he is in prison in Rome. This isn't the only time, though. Whenever Paul was in Thessalonica, they would also send funds to help him during this time. So, and he would say whenever no other congregation was helping him or able to help him or committed to helping him, they were. And that's speaks volumes about this congregation. Look at Philippians 4:18 real quick with me before we get too deep into each one of these points. Notice how Paul describes their offering. I have received full payment and more. I am well supplied, having received from Epaphroditus the gifts you sent, a fragrant offering, a sacrifice acceptable and well-pleasing to God. And we'll talk a little more about that later. Notice that Paul would equate their helping him as helping who? God. They're supporting him as sacrifice to God. Why and how could Paul say something like that? Right. Well, what's Paul doing? Yeah, he's preaching the gospel. He's spreading the gospel. He's completely involved in this. Yes, sir?
He says that in verse 15.
Right. And since you brought it up, we'll read it. And you Philippians yourselves know that in the beginning of the gospel, when I left Macedonia, no church entered into, I like the word he uses there, partnership. Partnership. Because now it's not just sometimes we can. I've heard people. I'm trying to find the right word to use here, but speak poorly. I guess speak poorly about. We don't really get out there and do mission work ourselves. All we do is pay other people to do it for us. Pay other people to do it for us. And there's something to that if we aren't willing to share the gospel ourselves or to teach the gospel to others or to make every effort to make sure the gospel is taught. But notice here that what the word is. Partnership. That they have they're giving money, right? They're giving money, and Paul says they're involved in the spread of the gospel because they gave money. Not everyone is an ear. Not everyone is an eye. Not everyone is a mouth. As a matter of fact, as we continue to look at Epaphroditus, not one word is mentioned of him being any kind of a vocal teacher, minister, preacher. Just that he was ministering to Paul. So in this case, he's involved in supporting or helping Paul. Yes, ma'am.
But it also says they're receiving.
Yes, and they're receiving something from Paul in this. What are they receiving? Think about it for a moment. Yeah. Well, prayer is one of the main things that Paul would say that he was offering up on their behalf, and we'll read that in a moment too. The fruits of the labor of the work, blessings from God because, we reap what we sow, right? And monetary efforts are part of all of this. Now, what we have to shy away from is thinking that I can accomplish all of my responsibility as a Christian by giving money to someone else. That can be part of it, but that doesn't relinquish me from doing what I can in the Great Commission. That can be part of it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be the one standing in a pulpit somewhere or the one on the mission field. But there are a lot of people involved here in this work, in this congregation, that weren't out in the mission field, but they were doing everything that they could to help support that.
Paul called this a sacrifice too, James. So they were, apparently they were giving as much as they could give.
Yeah. And the phraseology of sacrifice, I think it's they're giving bountifully. I believe that for sure. But also, when we think of sacrifice, and the reason I say this is because he calls it a sweet-smelling aroma. And when we think of that, that's something that's been offered to who? To God. And so their efforts here are not just coming from, not just overflowing and bountiful, but it is also something that they are doing for God. This is part of their religious service to God. Did you have a comment? There you go. When we do it to the least, we do it to who? To Jesus. Jesus said that. Matthew 25 is what she was referring to there. Yes, and it does certainly remind me of that as well. We probably ought to spend more time thinking on that particular passage. Anyway, the Philippian congregation sent one of their own to make sure that this money gets to Paul. And it seems like it's a substantial amount of money sent from a group of people. Now, if we were going to send money to a missionary in a foreign field, what would we do? I'm sorry?
Wire it.
we probably wire it. There have been times when it was less than, the $10,000 that you have to claim if you're flying into another country. So it's less than that, and so maybe we send it in cash, or we send it in a check with, say, Roberto. Roberto's going to help build a congregation. Build a building for a congregation in El Salvador, and so he takes a check with him and he goes. And then while he's there, and I've been there to see this, the guy that is given the money then turns around from the previous time that we helped and gives Roberto an itemized list, and it's not typed up, it's handwritten, of every cent of that money that was spent, so that he knew so that we would know where the money was being used and that it was not being used improperly. Now, in the first century, money being sent, who do you choose to send money that far to the Apostle Paul? Yes, you have to trust this guy. And then even if the congregation picks a guy that we trust enough to send this money, there's always somebody in the congregation who's still wondering, what's he going to do with that money? Is he going to spend it? Is he going to make it there? Maybe questioning whether or not this person was trustworthy or not. And we'll see some of that, I think, at least a hint of it in our text, of whether or not Epaphroditus completed his mission. But Epaphroditus would evidently get sick. Well, he did get sick, but we're not exactly sure at what stage he got sick. And there would be some concern over that, because word would get back to Philippi that Epaphroditus had gotten sick. So let's begin with the reading of the text here. Let me pull it back down. Philippians 2:25 through 30. And then let's just read that for now. Philippians 2:25 through 30. Who would like to read for us? All right, Tim.
Yet I considered it necessary to send you Epaphroditus, my brother, fellow worker, and fellow soldier, but your messenger and the one who ministered to my need, since he was longing for you all and was distressed because you had heard that he was sick. For indeed he was sick almost unto death, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. Therefore I sent him the more eagerly, that when you see him again, you may rejoice, and I may be less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such men in esteem. Because for the work of Christ he came close to death, not regarding his life, to supply what was lacking in your service toward me.
So the first thing I want to spend some time looking at is the titles that Paul would give him in this these first few verses. He calls him brother, yeah, fellow soldier, fellow worker. What'd you say, brother?
Well, the King James says companion in labor.
Okay, fellow worker,
Fellow soldier.
fellow soldier,
Messenger
messenger,
and minister.
minister. Lots of, at least 4 terms there, maybe 5. They say something about Epaphroditus, but they also say something about the way that Paul looks at the work. So let's look at it from the way Paul looks at the work first. If Paul refers to someone as a fellow soldier, how does Paul look at the work?
Like a battle.
Like a battle, yeah. I mean, and he's often written of the work as a battle between good and evil, righteous and unrighteous, darkness and light. It's a spiritual warfare, he would often refer to it. And by referring to Epaphroditus as a fellow soldier, what is he also saying about Epaphroditus? He's a fighter, okay? He's someone who was willing to fight if it came to it. Fight, physically fight? No, he's talking about what? A spiritual battle. He's talking about someone who is willing to stand up for the gospel. Fellow soldier. Do battle for this. What else? It's a fellow worker. What does that say about Paul and Epaphroditus?
But it's kind of obvious that it is work.
It's not a vacation. It's not a vacation. We're not sending Epaphroditus. I mean, I'm sure Rome was probably one of the nicest cities around, and that's where they're sending Epaphroditus to go and visit with Paul. And I don't know how it would have compared during that time to Philippi, but it's a much larger city than Philippi was. So could have anyone have thought, oh, he's taking a nice little trip? We certainly think that sometimes about individuals we send on mission trips. That, oh, they're taking, or maybe we think when we go on a mission trip, we're taking a little vacation. Well, you find out real quick, El Salvador is no vacation. It's hot, right, Chris? You get out there and working with people who don't even have floors in their houses, and their walls are made out of bamboo with rocks in between the slats. It's no vacation. Fellow worker, what else?
Brother, that's probably the nicest thing you could say.
Yes, brother in Christ would denote, and why would he need to? And I guess that's what I'm getting at. Why would he need to say that? They know him. And it seems like he's from Philippi because he was the one who brought the money to Paul to begin with. Now he's sending him, my brother. They know he's a Christian, so it means something more than just a Christian. I think that's what it is too. Just talking about the relationship that they would have, the appreciation that Paul has for him, the closeness of this bond that they have.
And he mentions in verse 29 to hold them in esteem. So he wants them to, I guess he's giving them these titles to emphasize how he feels about it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to talk more about that particular verse a little later, but if you need to tell a group of people to hold someone in high esteem, whom they've already chosen to send funds, trustworthy to send funds, is there something more there? It seemed like they already hold him in high esteem if they've sent him with these funds, but maybe there's not everybody, right? Maybe not everybody. And don't forget, Epaphroditus gets sick along the way, and Paul would say right there in 25, I have thought it necessary to send Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker, fellow soldier, and messenger and minister to my needs, for he has been longing for you all and has been distressed because you heard that he was ill. They sent him there not just to bring funds, but to do what? Minister to Paul. So we're sending you not just to give this support to Paul, but to hang around and help him with what he needs. And when he gets there, what? He's sick. He can't help Paul. Maybe Paul now is helping him. And maybe the funds are having to be used to help him get better. And he's worried about that. Oh, they're going to think that I failed at my job, that I wasn't able to accomplish. I'm so worried about that. And so I'm sure many of them are worried about my health as well. I need to get back and assure them that everything went okay, everything is good. Paul would say in the beginning of this letter, in chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, about the Philippians and their support while he's in prison, he would say, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making request for you all with all joy, for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. Let me ask you a personal question. Who do you pray for every day? Without fail.
Church.
Those that are closest to you. I mean, because sometimes maybe if things are getting a little chaotic and you didn't reserve as much time as you did yesterday to pray, and maybe the time's a little shorter, and you're saying that prayer, that prayer's a little bit shorter, who are you going to definitely include? Family. Right? Those who you love, those who you're closest to. Who is Paul including? He says every single, not just every day, right? He says every opportunity that I have to pray, I'm praying for you. That is remarkable. Remember, Lydia is there. She was hospitable to Paul there in Acts chapter 16. This financial support is given to him here. It was given to him in Thessalonica, and Paul is very appreciative of it. Why does Paul feel this way about Epaphroditus? These titles, the words that he uses to refer to him, why does he have this connection, this closeness, or this warmth?
He's proved himself
How did he prove himself?
through service.
Yes, through service, and not just any service. The man left his home to travel, and I showed you how far it is, and he likely took a ship to get there because it would have been a lot quicker than traveling around by land. And this, we'll talk more about his illness later, but traveling during this time any time of year, traveling in this time in history, from one place to another would not have been easy for someone's immune system. You go into you go to another country. What do they tell you to do? Don't drink the water, right? Don't drink the water. Make sure everything you eat is properly prepared and cooked. And well, this man got sick, and this man was willing to do this. Craig S. Keener, in his commentary, wrote, travel conditions were dangerous and harsh, especially at sea in late fall and early spring, and these conditions decreased one's resistance to antiquity's many diseases. And so Paul would say, my brother, fellow worker, fellow soldier, but your messenger, and the one who ministered to my needs.
Paul had been shipwrecked on one of his journeys.
It's dangerous. And this man was willing to do this. And how bad was his sickness?
Almost to death.
Almost to death. So here's someone who's willing, and according to what we read there, it seems like Epaphroditus coming close to death in this, it didn't faze him. He was willing to do it, willing to go that far for the sake of the gospel. He was ready to work, ready to fight if necessary, all for the sake of the gospel. And we don't, like I said earlier, we don't find any indication that he was a preacher or a teacher of any kind, but rather a minister, a servant to Paul's needs there. Someone, Paul at this time is getting old. Philemon 9, Ephesians 6:20. He's an older man, so he's needing someone, and he's in prison, house arrest, of course, but still someone to purchase and prepare his food, to care for him, to make sure he has clothes to wear, but also 2 Corinthians 12:7, his thorn in the flesh. If this is a physical ailment, he's needing someone to minister to him. Yes?
Just something else about the titles. Like you said, we don't really get any indication that Epaphroditus was, going out being a missionary in the way that Paul was. It seems more like he's serving and just kind of fulfilling whatever Paul's mission is. But he puts fellow in front of every single one of those titles, and that equates to an equal relationship between them. It's not that Paul is great and Epaphroditus is just a servant. It's they are equal in the eyes of Paul, which means in the eyes of God they are equal.
Mm-hmm. Throughout the Bible, that's often the case with great leaders, that they don't see themselves as greater than everybody else, but that they lead from example. All right, let's talk some more about, and then just briefly, because we're out of time, his illness. We're not told whether he got sick on the way there, whether he got sick while ministering to Paul while he's in Rome, but we do know that it was pretty bad, near to death, verse 27 says. And how long was he sick? It doesn't say. Long enough that it got back to the congregation. A congregation that is not close by. So he's sick for a while, but at the time that Paul is writing the letter and sending it back, he's better. But still, we're talking about, all right, let's say he arrived sick. And as soon as he got there, he wants to send a letter back to let maybe his family and others know that he has arrived, but that he is very sick. It still takes time for that letter to get all the way back and for word to come back again. Just a lot of distance, slowing things down. So Paul would report in verse 26, he was longing for you all and was distressed because you heard that he was sick. Maybe distressed over his people worrying about him, but also if he had a job to do of ministering to Paul, maybe distressed that others might be thinking that he wasn't able to do his job. Yeah.
It's interesting that Paul didn't arrive
That was my next point, but go ahead.
Well, there was no point, because the miracles were to prove that God was, Jesus was who he was. The people around Paul at that point already knew that.
Yeah.
There was no purpose to miraculously healing Epaphroditus.
You know, after thinking about all of this, couldn't we, I mean, Brian, couldn't you come up with some kind of, using the technicalities that we know regarding miracles to be able to do this? I mean, if it was me, I'd say, okay, if this is the limitations of this, come with me. We're going to go out to the town square, and I'll heal you out here so people can see. But it really seems like when we look at the scriptures that these miracles, they didn't just take place randomly. I mean, they didn't take place at the behest of the individual. These miracles took place when and where God wanted them to. Yes. When and where God wanted them to.
I mean, Paul was praying that he would be healed, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And I have written here in my, as a side note, why no miracle? And, so you got to it just before I did, but that's exactly the question we needed to ask here, and that's the answer. All those in the house with Paul, they know, but I mean, surely there was one individual somewhere that could pass by that wasn't a Christian that could have seen it, but still, it was it wasn't the time. It wasn't in God's will for that to happen at that moment, and prayers for him to be restored to his health. What? Eventually, he is healed. Or he is restored to his health. All right, we're going to pick up right there. We'll definitely finish next week, and because there's not much left to talk about. And we will get into discussion on Titus. All right, and the passages we'll look at are Galatians 2, 1 through 5. 2 Corinthians 7, 13 through 15, and Titus 1. We may look at some others as well, but for now, that's what we'll use.